This is episode 116 of the Trauma Coaching for Latter-day Saints podcast, Why Love is Not Enough. I'm your host, Danita Bremer. I'm a Latter-day Saint mom with a history of trauma. I've figured out how to heal my trauma, and I can help you do the same. Why? Because trauma is one obstacle to gathering Zion. Let's talk about what it takes to truly heal and find lasting joy. All right, I am going to sing for you just a tiny little bit, and then I'll tell you why. All you need is love, love. Love is all you need. Love is all you need. This sentiment about love being all we need is pervasive in our culture. And today I want to tell you why love is not all you need. Love is not enough. This is going to answer the question of, why do I want my husband to do the dishes? Not necessarily because the dishes need to be done, although the dishes do need to be done, but why that, it feels like a need to have my kids or my husband see the things that need to be done and just do them, right? This episode is going to answer those questions. It's also going to answer the question about if you have heard from popular self-help, the idea that the thoughts that you have about another person are your relationship with that person. I'm going to address that as well. So the main idea for this podcast episode is that love and attunement are very different. Now, I'm not going to define love because I think we all know what love is. We've felt loved. We felt a lack of love. But attunement is not a word that many of us are intimately familiar with. So I'm going to just take a minute and define attunement. I went first to the Googles and I found a couple of definitions. One is attunement is a kinesthetic and emotional sensing of others, knowing their rhythm, affect, and experience by metaphorically being in their skin and going beyond empathy to create a two-person experience of unbroken feeling connectedness by providing a reciprocal affect and or resonating response. So that was super technical. Another definition is the reactiveness we have to another person. Much more simple, but that doesn't quite get it. I found this quote by Dr. Dan Siegel, who said, "When we attune with others, we allow our own internal state to shift, to come to resonate with the internal world of another. This resonance is at the heart of the important sense of feeling felt that emerges in close relationships. Children need attunement to feel secure and to develop well. And throughout our lives, we need attunement to feel close and connected." And I will drop the link to the article that I found that quote in the show notes. So attunement is this sense that somebody sees and knows us and understands how we feel. It's beyond empathy. It's kind of this internal felt sense of, you see me, you hear me, you understand my needs, and you meet my needs. Okay. So this is the first episode of a 5-episode series in which I'm going to cover the 5 core needs that we have. Attunement is one of them. It's actually not the first one, but I just really have been thinking a lot about this idea about the difference between love and attunement, and how when we understand the difference, it fills in some gaps in our mind, but also in our felt sense in our bodies. And I will say that this idea and this understanding of the difference between love and attunement really helped me overcome some of the resistance I felt in the beginning when I was starting to heal from the traumas that I had experienced. Something that almost always comes up. I don't want to say always because I haven't worked with everyone on earth, but I think is super common. And this is something, if you sign up for a free session with me, often comes up right away. It's just very, very common. This idea that, my parents loved me. So we had a very loving family. So I don't know that I really have trauma. Right. And there is a little bit of resistance that happens to almost to like healing. It's almost like if I heal from my trauma, then I have to admit that my parents or my home life or the situation that I was in wasn't all good. Right. And we do have resistance to that for good reason. I didn't want to blame my parents because I knew they loved me. And I also truly believed that they did the best with what they had. So if my parents loved me, how do I reconcile the fact that not all my needs were met? Right. Especially without blaming them. It was difficult for me to reconcile that whole idea of my needs weren't met, but it's not my parents' fault. And my parents loved me. It's like I needed another explanation, right? I needed either something or someone else to blame, or my understanding wasn't complete. And I believe my understanding wasn't complete. Once I understood that there's a difference between love and attunement, I was like, oh, this explains it. This explains how my parents could deeply love me. And also, my needs weren't all met. And they aren't to blame for it because they could love me and not be attuned to me. Right. And I feel this as a parent as well. I can love my kids, I can love my husband, but at the same time, it's possible for me to not totally be attuned to what they need. Sometimes we can't be attuned because that other person doesn't want us to be attuned. Right. But sometimes we can. I think sometimes my son is a little weirded out by how attuned I am to him. It's like he can get in the car after school and I can be like, whoa, what happened to you today? And he's like, he tries to brush it off. Nothing. I had a fine day. It was fine. Nothing's wrong. But like I can just tell just from his energy, from his facial expression, from his body language, from what he doesn't say and do. I know him very, very well. And I'm very attuned to his signals. Probably I'm less attuned to my daughters and my husband. Attunement is about having or stating your needs. So having needs, stating needs, and allowing those needs to be met. And when you are not attuned to, you will often feel shame around having and expressing your needs. Okay. So this is one of our core needs. It's not just to be loved. Love is a separate core need, but attunement for someone to really notice what is going on for us and to meet our needs. So when we are not attuned to, especially early on, as we're developing and growing and our nervous systems are developing and our brains are developing and we're learning how to be in the world, if we are not attuned to, we will feel shame around having and expressing needs. And so what does that mean? When we are not attuned to, we learn to cope. We learn to respond to that lack of attunement. And there are lots of different ways this shows up. I'm just going to talk about a few of them. The first one that I see is hyper independence. If you can't attune to my needs, then I just won't have any needs. I'll take care of my needs completely myself, which actually doesn't mean we don't have needs, but that's sort of how we think when we're very young. It can also show up as perfectionism, as like I have to keep the house completely spotless at all times kind of thing, because that's a version of you won't be able to see my needs, right? If you can't attune to my needs, then I won't have needs, as in I won't let myself show that I have needs. It can also show up with codependency. So there's kind of the other end of the spectrum. Not really, but somewhat. And codependency is when I won't have needs, or you take care of my needs and I'll take care of yours. So I'll depend on you, you depend on me, and together we'll meet each other's needs, right? Codependency is an unhealthy version of that. We want to be interdependent. We don't want to be independent completely. We need other people. We're meant to be social creatures, but we don't want to be codependent, like our needs are tangled up. I have to have you meet this need or else I feel like I'm dying, kind of thing, right? Okay, so another way this shows up is that if you can't attune to me, then I won't express my needs. I just will bite my tongue. I won't say anything. I will not communicate my needs to you. This is where we kind of get into some people pleasing and we like shove our own needs and emotions down. This can cause a lot of problems, not being able to express ourselves. Being able to express yourself is part of your identity. And if you don't feel safe enough or supported enough or capable of expressing your needs, you're basically shutting down a large part of yourself, which is a form of trauma. Like that's going to show up in your life. It could show up in disease, like autoimmune issues, like MS or other things. It also can just breed a lot of resentment, right? When we feel like we want to say something, we want to express something, but we can't, right? Because of lots of years of patterning of like, I just won't express my needs. When I express my needs, you don't attune to them. So I just won't express them. On the other end of that spectrum is an oversharing of needs. Like, you don't attune to my needs. Well, I'll just shove them in your face and I'll make them super obvious, right? Kind of in an attempt of like, see, they're so obvious. Can't you see them? And won't you please meet them? Right. So I wanted to address this idea that your relationship with another person is simply your thoughts about that person. Now, I first was trained as a life coach through the life coach school, which is pretty strictly mindset coaching. And when we come upon this idea of like, maybe a marriage, maybe you're coaching about a marriage, that there's a relationship here and that the stuck point is in the relationship, right? It's often or common for a coach to say, but your relationship is just your thoughts about that person. And sometimes that is true. So my mom passed away when I was 20 years old. And I can't like call her on the phone. I can't email her. She can't show up on my doorstep, right? She is like, it's literally not possible. So my relationship with my mom right now literally is just my thoughts and feelings about her. Same thing with God, right? It's not like he's physically here. I mean, I kind of think he is, but I can't see him with my physical eyes, right? So my relationship with God is very much my thoughts and feelings about him. So I don't want to say that that's not valid. But since I've been learning about the nervous system and how we develop physically, physiologically, biologically, there is something to be said about it's not just your thoughts and feelings about that person, right? So I have 3 kids and I have a husband that I live with. Well, I live with 2 of my kids. It's not just my thoughts about my kids and how they should be more willing to help or they should take their dish to the dishwasher after dinner. That feeling that inside of us is, I think, related to attunement. When we are in relationship with people, especially like in our environment, we want to be attuned to. We want the people around us to see us and see our needs and come meet our needs sometimes, right? This is a very natural, normal thing. As an infant, it was our survival, right? If our parents didn't see that we were hungry and didn't feed us, then we could literally die. So this felt sense of like, you see me, you know me, you understand my needs this attunement, is actually very much related to like, it feels like I need it, right? So when we feel lonely, even if we're in a crowd of people, it might be that we're feeling a lack of attunement, right? It's like I'm surrounded by all these people, but nobody really sees me and sees my needs and meets them. Now, it's true that once we see, oh, I need attunement, we can work to attune to ourselves. Like we can meet our own needs to a certain extent. But I still believe, and this is kind of a working belief, I haven't fully developed this, but I believe that, like I said earlier, we are social creatures. We are not meant to be alone. It is not good for man to be alone, right? And part of that, I believe, is that we want to be interdependent on each other and we want to be seen and known and for someone else to meet our needs. I am a huge believer in teaching your kids to be independent, probably because of how I grew up. And my kids are very independent. Like I have a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old, and I could probably leave them for the weekend and they'd be totally fine. Right. I haven't done that yet, but I probably could. And one time, my daughter, my middle daughter, who is very independent, she takes care of herself. She's my vegetarian and nobody else is vegetarian. So sometimes she cooks for herself. She came to me one day and she said, you know, Mom, I can make myself food, but sometimes it's just really nice when you do it for me. And it was very mature of her to speak that need out loud. And that resonated with me. I was like, yes, I feel the same way. I can clean the whole house myself, but sometimes it's really nice when other people help me. Right. And so she was expressing this need for me to attune to her and meet her needs just because I wanted to. So now I try to make sure on a regular basis that I am doing something for her that she could totally do for herself, not because she's not independent, but because I just want to attune to her and I want to meet her needs. I think this is really overlooked. And it's also why so many of us feel like we're having trauma responses. But then we say, but I never have really had anything big happen to me. My husband loves me. My kids are great. My parents were very loving, right? There's not like this one event that we can point our finger at. But do you have older siblings that had issues or problems, maybe health problems that you kind of got overlooked? Did you just come from a large family where nobody's needs could be attuned to very much because there were 8 kids and 2 parents, right? This lack of attunement can foster trauma, right? It can foster this sense of like, oh, I just never feel supported. I never feel like I have quite enough, right? And that can lead us to pushing through, right? I see this a lot with my Enneagram nines who don't like conflict. They want to keep the peace. They do a lot, they take a lot of action in order to keep other people happy, but then their needs aren't always necessarily attuned to, right? So it's almost like we're playing this game of like, oh, if I attune to your needs, if I do things for you, will you do that for me too? And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, right? So we have to start fostering within our relationships and within ourselves, our relationship with ourselves, even this connection and this attunement of like, what do I need? That is why I love to put my hand on my heart and just connect into my body and say, what do I need right now? Right before I hit record on this podcast episode, I paused and I was like, I need something. What do I need? And I was like, oh, I'm super thirsty. So I went and I got a drink of water. I stood in the sun for a moment and then I came in here and hit record. Right. So we want to be continually attuning to ourselves. The more we can attune to ourselves, the more we can attune to those around us and vice versa. If maybe for you, you want to start practicing attuning to the people around you, that will grow your ability to attune to yourself. All right, journal questions. I just have 2 this week. When have you felt unattuned to or not attuned to? And what did that feel like inside of your body? And when have you felt attuned to? And what did that feel like inside of your body? If you want a safe place to practice attunement and being attuned to, come join my group coaching membership. It's called Presence. We are practicing being present with ourselves and with other people. It's a very safe place. This is the kind of work we're doing, and it's amazing. We've only met twice. I just launched this group, and it's a year-long membership. So you can come in at any time, and you're not missing anything. There are replays, there's a member site, everything you need is there. But it's a really amazing place to feel what we're talking about here, that internal sense of, I feel seen, I feel heard, I feel like my needs are met, I feel supported. And right now, for a limited time until March 31st, if you come and you pay for 1 year in advance, you actually are paying for a lifetime membership. So you can come and you can pay monthly, it's $222 a month, or you can pay yearly, it's $22.22 a year. So that's a 2-month discount if you pay for a year all at once. And from now until March 31st, if you pay for a year all at once, you become a founding lifetime member. That is such an incredible deal. I want as many people to come in as possible. For now, I'm capping this group at 20. So it'll go until March 31st or until we have 20 members, whichever comes first. That's enough for now, and so are you. The impact I am making in the world grows best by word of mouth. Would you please share this episode with someone this week? And if you're ready to address your own trauma with my support, go to danitabrummer.com to schedule a free trauma assessment call. Until next time, go be yourself and follow the spirit.